Hello, my name is Craig Frazier, and this is my partner Dion Giuliano, one of the top clear coaters and painters in the nation today. And together we own the company Cal Concepts Air Syndicate. Our video today is based on clear coating on custom graphics. We're going to show the ins and outs of how to do specialized clear coating as well as large-scale clear coating on flat surfaces as well as curved surfaces. We're also going to show how to incorporate pearls such as ghost imaging or ghost flames within a clear coat, how to do touch-ups into that clear coat, and repairs and troubleshootings in your clear coating system. We're going to cover the equipment and the materials needed to produce the best custom clear coat you've ever done.
Before we get started, I'd like to talk a little bit about the materials we're going to be using today. We're going to be using the House of Color base coat, clear coat, urethane system. I'd like to start off first with the pearls. We're going to be using pearls for effects and graphics today. And then we're going to do some flat panels with some flake. And then we're going to use some KK in the SG100, this is a concentrated candy. The clear we'll be using today is the UC35, which is one of the finest high solids in the world. Then we're going to go to the shimmerins, and the shimmerins we'll be using for different effects and techniques. The UK candy is what we'll be using today also, and that's a catalyzed candy. And we'll be using the RU311 for the reducer due to the temperature. We'll also talk a little bit about mixing, how important it is, because without mixing these products perfectly, we're going to have a problem. We're going to talk a little bit about safety today, air masks, chute suits, and fresh air systems. And then these will be the guns that we'll be using today. We're going to do all the different techniques with all these materials with these guns. So let's get started.
Since we had painted this hood with our BC25 black House of Color base coat overnight, we're going to need to scuff it the next day. Most base coats have a window of anywhere from 12 to 24 hours, in which case if you don't clear them within that window, you must scuff them. Now Dion's using a red Scotch-Brite pad to lightly scuff the surface. This scuffing doesn't remove much material, but what it does do is knock down the shine and allow for a mechanical tooth for the clear or any other paint application to stick to. If your base coat is a metallic and you do this scuffing technique, you will scratch the metallics or the pearls involved in it. In this situation, you would end up using an inner coat clear on top of that base coat so that the next day when you did the scuffing, you would only be scuffing the inner coat and not damaging the underlying metallics. As Dion finishes scuffing the hood, I'm going to prepare to tack the surface to remove any lint and dirt. Tack cloths come folded up. A common problem that painters have is to use the tack cloth all folded, and this can leave adhesive behind as a contaminant. You want to unfold the tack cloth right out of the package and let it air for about 15 minutes, just draped out. Then you never fold it up. You bunch it up like this. And you don't even press hard. I just let the weight of the tack cloth remove the dirt. And you may not think this is very effective, but this tack cloth is very sticky. Notice the black already on there just from the scuffing. You want to go all around this. This takes not only just the scuffing dirt off and some of that stray black paint and overspray, but also any dust and dirt from the booth. Now that Dion's got the hood all prepped and ready, I'm going to start laying in some flames that we're going to do some marbleizing and purling on for some effects underneath the clear. The layout tape I'm going to use is 3M 1/8" blue fine line tape. This is a vinyl tape that curves really nicely around corners and is excellent for freehand layouts. Find the end of the tape, and the way you work it is you basically set up an anchor and you pull the tape along in the design. I'm going to anchor it right up here, and since it's flexible, it'll make a nice curve as I come around and go all the way down this logo. Now that squeak you hear is basically just my finger along the surface. Then starting again, I'll come up from the top. And I know I mentioned I was going to do a flame. See how I got a nice scallop going here? Sometimes it's good to start out with a scallop and have that branch into a flame. Notice I'm going to curve up, and it's literally like an orchestra of your two hands working together. The one hand following and anchoring the tape as the next hand, the second hand, the one holding the tape, actually does the design work. The average layperson may assume that the hand pressing the tape down is doing the layout. That's not true. It's just following and guiding the tape, making sure that as you curve, it keeps nice and steady. You don't want any jerky lines. If you have any bad lines in here, what's going to happen is it's going to be translated into your actual graphic itself. And come right back up here and mimic our scallop that we have over here. You want it to be fairly close to the one you just did. And quite often you can eyeball it pretty dang close. Now you see this up here, kind of little messy ends. Don't worry about it. We're painting the center of this design. All we're concerned about is a clean edge from our blue tape. Notice I'm running my fingers over it. I'm making sure it's all pressed down so I'm not going to have any bleeding. Then I'm going to come in and start another one over here. Set up another scallop, probably a little bit higher. You don't want to do them all the same height. And I'm following the body line. Never lay out graphics on a vehicle without taking the body line into consideration. And mimicking the same style of flames, I come in here and I finish up these designs. Now the first flame you lay out is the one that's going to determine the style of the rest of your job. If you make a little mistake or do a little weird little flame, sometimes instead of redoing the entire flame job, it's better to just do them all in that style. Many times continuity is more important in custom painting than perfection. When doing this, you've got to have an intrinsic, natural sense of balance in your design. I'm looking around the whole design as I do these flames. If you just look at one small area as you do the layout, you're going to get what we call tunnel vision. You're going to create this really great design that doesn't take into account the outside body lines of the vehicle. And I can come in with one more flame, I think. Let's see. Sometimes I'll look at it and I'll kind of just trace my hand along, figure out what I can do. Yeah, I'll come with one more flame here. Keep the continuity. Look at the bases. See, the negative of the flame is a drip. If all these little drips here are basically the same, then their negative space is agreeing with your positive element of the flame. There is a scientific way to approach flame jobs. Even though it is a very freehand and free-form concept, you can apply techniques to make sure you're doing the job right. And as I come around this last bend, I'll finish off this flame and actually turn this flame right here into the last scallop of this job, actually extending this one here. Now I finished the layout of the flames on the other side of the hood. We went over all the tape to make sure there's no lifts or bubbles that may cause some leakage. And now it's time to actually start masking. When you mask off layout graphics, you can do it a number of different ways. You can use masking tape, in which case you'd use 3/4 inch tape or 2-inch tape. You can also use a transfer tape system. What we're going to use today is a transfer tape system. This actual product here is called Auto Mask, made by Coast Airbrush. It's a paper-based masking system with adhesive backing on it. It's much thinner and lighter consistency than normal masking tape and cuts a little bit easier. It's also more transparent so you can see the graphics through it, easier to know where to cut. Now I'm going to work with Dion on this, where he's going to grab it, I'm going to unroll it. You can get this in a number of different lengths and widths. We're going to go across the whole hood and just drape it down, just lightly. Not real tight, because we're going to come in and fill in that one area there with our squeegees. This is originally a sign product. I'm cutting the edge here with my razor blade. Then I go in with my squeegee. And I start from the center out, and Dion will do the same thing over there. I'm putting the tape down with the squeegee, getting out the air bubbles. Now, unlike the sign industry, where when you're laying out graphics, you got to get every bubble out for appearance sake, a few bubbles now and then when doing masking doesn't matter. You press them down. See that right there? A little bit of a bubble that lined out and became a crease. But you know something? We're cutting this. As long as it's pressed down, the crease will stick to itself and not cause any bleeds. If you don't press out all the wrinkles, the wrinkle can go from being just a simple wrinkle to being like a tunnel, and the paint itself will travel along that tunnel. One more sheet right here will be all we need, and we can patch in the bottom. After we've laid the single sheets down over the whole hood, we'll each take the sheets and do just the small corners at the tips of the hood. You can do this with masking paper if you like, or just masking tape. But if you're using the transfer tape, sometimes it's easier just to do the whole hood with the transfer tape itself. Then using the squeegee out all of the wrinkles. And when we're done, in a very small amount of time by comparison to standardized taping, we'll have this hood completely masked off and protected and ready to start cutting out the graphics. We've got all the transfer paper laid out here and smoothed out, making sure there's no air bubbles or any areas that are lifting that the paint can travel down when we actually do spraying. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our knives and cut out the entire design right on top of this paper. Using the blue fine line underneath is not only a guide for the flames, but also as a buffer so our knives don't go all the way through into the paint job. Now what I'm doing right now may seem kind of bizarre. I'm just leaving little marks so we know which areas to remove. You may find this redundant, but you'd be surprised how many times your mind plays tricks on you when you're painting, and even the most advanced painters will cut everything out and then pull the wrong side. We're removing this area to do the marbleizing on. Now the blades we're going to be using today are these. They're just single edge razor blades. You can get them in packs of 100 and 200. They're pretty inexpensive at most automotive stores. There's carbon steel ones and stainless steel. We like the stainless because they don't rust and they last a lot longer when cutting. Also, the stainless ones will not cut into glass if you have to do any cutting around glass and stuff. Now, you have to get a real light hand developed for this, and as I come along, I lightly cut along that blue tape, right in the center of it. I'm not going on the edge. You always want to make sure you're using a very sharp knife. Just like that old adage, you only cut yourself on dull knives. The only time you'll actually damage the paint surface if you're using a dull blade. You will develop a really keen eye and a light touch when doing this, but only over time and practice. Now, another thing you might want to also remember is about changing out blades. Changing blades not only gives you a new edge to work with, but it gives you a little bit of a break. If you start cutting along on a design, you'll find that the more you cut, the longer you're cutting on the design, the harder you're going to be pushing down. You won't even know it until about the time you get to the end of the vehicle, you're cutting into bare metal, you're pressing so hard. You don't even realize it. You just progressively get a heavier and heavier hand. So constantly remind yourself, light hand. Keep that hand light. You don't want to cut through. If you cut through the bare metal, you can cause a leakage area where actual clear will get down inside there. And months later or immediately after, it can either bubble, lift, chip, or delaminate the paint. At this point, we've got all the areas cut. If you've noticed up at the top, Dion has taken his knife and actually cut and lifted a little bit of the tips. This way, he's able to pull the masking all the way down. Since we progressively layered this paper, you can do it this way without getting any, what we call pullbacks, where you pull a little piece of tape and it stops. Notice how it just transitioned right into a nice pull all the way down. I'm going to do the same thing Dion did here. I'm lifting my tip of the flame with my knife, making sure it's not held down at all. And as I come along, it separates real nicely, joins with the next one, and I can pull this whole flame down right there. And I'll stop there and then keep on going, progressively working my way down. Don't rush this step. If you rush this step and make mistakes, it's going to be reflected in the quality of your paint. Any lifts, any areas, any cut-throughs will show in bleeds. And then you can go down and just pull it all the way through. Now we have a little area right here. It's actually a good example of how we're going to do some troubleshooting. See this? What this is we had a bare metal area on this hood before we painted it. And it lifted the paint off. Notice it only lifted right there because this is one small bad area. Now, this is an example of improper preparation. That's a good way to show how you can do a touch-up. Even though this is improperly prepped, if this was clear-coated, this never would have happened. The clear would have penetrated all the way through here. With an area this small, I don't want to come in and spray primer because it'll build up too much of an edge. I'm going to come in before we do our marbleizing, and with a little bit of base coat in my airbrush, just touch that up. Nice way of using the airbrush to touch up lifts here and there. See the area right here we're going to do our small repair on. It may feel a little smooth, but there's a slight edge there, and there may still be some loose paint that wants to lift up. Dion's going to come in with a piece of used 600 grit 3M sandpaper that's been soaked in water and start slightly feathering that edge. If I went ahead and did the touch-up without sanding, you would see that feathered edge right there, and there would still be the danger of some of that paint lifting later on. Now, you don't want to bathe this area in water. We have it masked off, and the water can damage this tape. So Dion progressively uses the wet sandpaper to get the feathered edge, and then comes in with the paper and wipes away the water before it starts soaking in and damaging the tape. Get any last bit of water off of there. Any water down there first is going to cause delamination of the paint later. Do a little test spraying on the side with my airbrush there. I've got BC25 black in this gun. Now, I know for all you bodywork purists out there, I'm not primering, but this is a very small area and the clear will lock in. This is a two-stage base coat I'm using, the BC25, and it dries very fast. I use a little air to help it along. And look at an angle on it. You can see if you're getting good coverage and if you have any of the feathered edge left. If I still saw a little bit of an edge, I'd wait about 15 minutes and then have Dion come back in with his sandpaper and feather it some more. Now the touch-up is done. I've noticed I've blended outward on it. Even though this is black and I probably didn't need to do that much, if this is any other color, I'd want to blend at least 2 to 3 inches in either direction to make sure that if for some reason the metallic didn't quite match, I could blend it away and you won't see that. We've already finished the layout, and we've pre-cleaned and wiped the surface down with a tack cloth to get rid of any stray dust. Now it's time for marbleizing. To marbleize the surface, we're going to use House of Color MB01 Silver White Marbleizer. This has a slow-drying clear in it that also has a dry pearl. The dry pearl is what gives the interesting effect. The slow-drying clear allows the surface to stay wet long enough so the Saran Wrap can create the effect and not dry too quickly. We're going to add this to Dion's gun, which is an LPH 100, ideal for spraying the marbleizer since it gives a good medium spray pattern, and it's a small enough gun you can get it in and around certain areas. You want to give a nice, even, wet coat when you spray it down. Too little and it will dry too fast. Too much, it'll be too wet and way too opaque. Notice how it looks like silver paint. It is pretty close to silver paint, except for it has no pigment in it. What you see is nothing but pearl. It's actually metallic. Now, Dion's going to grab this end of the Saran Wrap, and we're going to apply it to the first area that he actually sprayed. Go lengthwise on the hood, from the top down on the first area, lightly laying it on there, and then he grabs the next sheet. You got to kind of get this in concert with one another. Do this on your own, and it just dries way too fast. Now, I could leave it this way, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and use my hands to manipulate and spin different areas. If you grab and spin an area, it'll give a really funky effect when you finally take this all off. If you pull it off while it's still wet, that gives you a certain, almost a liquid plasma look. If you wait till it's dry and you lift it, it actually shreds the marbleizer itself and gives a ripped effect. How you like it is basically just about experimentation. Play around with it. Have fun with it. If you don't like it, when you do this, you yank this off and you're like, oh, that's not the effect you wanted. You can always come in and wipe down with pre-cleaner. This is not a very, very structurally strong material. It comes off instantly with pre-cleaner, sometimes even soap and water. So you want to be real careful once you apply it. If you like it, don't be wiping the surface down with anything to clean it because you'll probably remove the effect. I'm kind of liking this twist effect here, and I'm going to actually twist and lift, which will give a different effect. Notice how it almost looks like a plasma look going on there. Throw it back there. And look around. I'll take a spare piece of the Saran Wrap because if there's an area that you don't like too much, you can always come in. See, there's a little bit of a geometric shape in there. I can kill that by dabbing. Add a little bit more texture to some of this. That area up there looks a little bit dead. And we're going to let that dry a little bit. This takes a little bit longer than base coat to dry, sometimes anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes to completely dry. Then what we'll do is we'll just drape a piece of Saran Wrap over this just to protect it, because we're then going to spray the center one, and then we're going to spray the one over here. As a matter of fact, if you want to do different effects, you can. I'm going to do this one the same on this side, but in the center, let me show you another technique you can do. Dion, hand me the gun right now. I'm going to show you an interesting way of applying Saran Wrap. Actually, I'll have Dion spray it for me. Just spray it on the plastic that I bunched up here. Spray just a little bit wet on there. Okay, that's enough. Once you get it applied wet to the plastic, you can do what's called wet application, where you're not spraying it on, you just use the bunched up rag, or not rag, but Saran Wrap. And you come in, that's a little bit too wet, so I'm going to bunch up some more. And what it does, it leaves areas open that are completely black. Even with the marbleizer over here, when you use the Saran Wrap effect, even though it removes a lot and creates a pattern, the areas that are left black still have a little bit of pearl in them. If you do it this way, you create a really interesting effect that has some areas that look absolutely blank in space, and then ones that are pearled. There's tons of ways to do marbleizing. I could use my fingers to streak it back and forth to create like a wood grain effect. Dab it. You can use a sea sponge for a certain effect. Bubble wrap makes a real interesting effect. I've even seen tin foil that's laid on top. It gives it a real weird look to it when you leave it dry, and when it's dry, you yank it off and it rips off half the marbleizer. Coming in lightly with the RG3L, Dion sprays a perimeter of pearl along the outside edge of the entire design. This is going to give a very slight ghosting effect of blue that you'll only see at certain angles. As it comes up to the tips of the flames, Dion's going to get heavier on the tips, so the tips will jump out and really stand out. Heavy amounts of pearl on the tips will give a real nice effect when the light hits it at certain angles. Notice as he sprays, he is aiming the gun slightly away from the base of the flames. This prevents any overspray from floating back down and getting pearl in the center of the flame area. Since this is a pearl effect, if you apply too much, not only will it dominate the scene, but too much pearl will damage and cover up all your marbleizing. At this point, we're going to start unmasking the flames. Now you can wait until the clear is completely dry, that SG-100 that the pearl was in, or you can start unmasking when it's still slightly tacky. The benefit to unmasking before it's completely dry is that the edge that is normally formed when pulling the tape away will actually bend down and create a softer edge that will be easier to pinstripe. Always mask away from your graphic. This will prevent peelbacks or the tape accidentally hitting and leaving marks in the semi-dry paint. Because of the weakness of the marbleizer, any pre-cleaner wiped over the surface can remove some of it. But the nice thing about doing that SG-100 Intercoat Clear Pearl around the edge is that gives the marbleizer near the edge some extra strength. So you can actually come in and wipe right along the edge with pre-cleaner and not have any fear of damaging the marbleizer. Be sure to get every bit of the blue fine line tape off of the graphic. Any small trace will cause problems later on in the clear. Even if the clear buries it, this tape will work its way through the clear. As you notice, the blue fine line is coming up in separate strips. This is because the blue tape took the brunt of the knife cutting instead of the surface of the paint job. It is better to see your blue fine lines come up in separate strips than to see deep knife cuts into the base paint job. After the marbleizer, we've gone and cleaned the whole surface, pre-cleaned it and tacked it to get all the adhesive and any particles off after the masking. The next step is to come in and do some pinstriping. Now the stripe work I'm going to do on this hood is going to be just simple line work, so I'm going to be using an Excalibur sword striper. This is a 4/0, and it's already a pre-trimmed brush that's made by Mac for Excalibur. The paints we're using are the Automotive House of Color pinstriping urethanes. I've got my white, light blue, and lavender here. I'm also using the 0/0 lettering reducer, which is specifically designed for the striping paints. I also have some KU-150 catalyst here that I'm going to use a few drops of in the reducer just to lock in the paint real good. I also have a magazine here. When the weather's kind of hot, I'll use a magazine to palette the brush on because it won't absorb as much reducer. And in the wintertime, when it's colder, I'll sometimes use a phone book or a more absorptive material like newspaper. Notice how thin that brush is once it's reduced down. I'll take a little bit of my lavender, which is actually, I got a few drops of white mixed in with it to lighten it up a bit. Since I am going on a black hood, it needs to be lighter, otherwise it's too dark. And as I palette the brush, I'm actually working the paint in to the brush itself. Paleting also can help, besides loading up the paint in the brush, it also helps you figure out the right consistency of paint. You can feel the tension and the drag of the brush as you go back and forth. And the harder it pulls, the thicker the paint is. It takes a little bit of time and practice before you know how much paint you want to use. Now the reason I use the catalyst in the reducer and not in the paint is if I add it to the paint, this paint would probably start going off and hardening before I was even done striping. But if I put it in the reducer, the majority of my paint stays okay. I've got this paleted real nice, and holding it using my forefinger and my thumb, I'll suck it into my palm, the standard technique for holding the pinstripe brush, leaving these 3 fingers as guides. Now the noise you hear is the tension from my finger on the surface of the hood. As I've mentioned in the past, many pinstripers do not like this noise. As a matter of fact, sometimes they'll use baby powder to get rid of it. I actually like it. The tension that I feel from the surface helps me gauge the amount of pressure I'm applying to the brush itself. Start from the top again, looking over your hand, making sure you keep aligned on that edge. I'm also keeping approximately anywhere from a 30 to a 45 degree angle on the brush with even tension. If you don't use even tension, your brush will hop around or your line width will change. And when you get to an area of a curve, you want to use your fingers, your support fingers, as a compass and spin that brush accordingly. I'm actually twisting the brush in the direction that I'm doing the curve. Again, spinning the brush in the direction I'm curving. I try and stick right as close to that edge as possible. You can even push the brush if it'll help. This is called pushing, the opposite direction of when I was pulling the brush down. I'll show you can use a combination. Many people, and these stripers actually like to pull the first line of a flame or a graphic coming down. And then as they hit this radius down here, they'll pull their curve as tight as they can until it's not comfortable anymore. Then they'll come in and using the brush in a different position, we'll push it up. And many times you will have blind spots. If you have a blind spot, keep on going. You know the general direction you're going in. If you can't see your line, lift straight off. Never pull the brush when you lift it away from the surface. If you pull it, you'll end up dragging the line. I see a little bit of an edge right here I need to touch up. I didn't see it except for at an angle. I saw a little pearl kind of winking at me. Sometimes your brush will flip-flop on both sides of the line, and it missed a little bit. Notice I actually thickened the line right there, but you hardly even notice it. Matter of fact, it's going to work out really nice because I had it thicker on this side too. Notice I've already cleaned the brush out with my reducer, and I've got a mixture here of light blue with a little bit of white in it. And I've also torn off that one page, so I have a clean palette to start with. Nice thing about magazines, you keep on tearing. Now, it is kind of, there's a little bit of violet left in there, but that won't matter with the blue. Palette the brush real good. Not only is this important now just to fill up the brush like we talked about before, but also we need to eliminate as much of the violet that's left in there. And the violet will still be up close to the top of the ferrule. With the brush nice and paletted, I'm going to come in and start in on the top line. Being careful not to miss that edge. It's kind of hard because you're blindsided at first when you start striping from the top on these hoods. And as you start seeing the edge, you can get a little bit more confident and start building up speed. Remember, as you start building up speed and coming towards yourself, you're going to want to make sure you start changing the angle on that brush. And I stop before I get to the end. Reason being is, all I can see is the tip of that, and it's over striping. In other words, when I see the tip and I stop, I still got a 1/4 inch to go. It keeps on striping from the back of the brush. So I'll start from the bottom down here and then just work my way up to there. What I'm giving you here are suggestions and examples on what works for me. What works for you and your style of painting may be totally different. So you can try these techniques, or at least learn from them to develop your own. That's the key thing with pinstriping, is take the existing techniques, equipment, and materials and come up with something completely unique with the way you approach the artwork and the way you perform the techniques. As you can see, we got the hood completely striped. We're going to give this pinstriping about an hour or so to dry before we come in and do our final clear coat.
Before we get to the fun part of clearing, I'd like to go over the materials that we'll be using, the safety issues, the mixing, and the type of equipment we'll be using. We're going to start off with the UC35 and the KU150 catalyst. This is an exempt catalyst that is used in different parts of the country, so you might have to check with your technical or your jobber for what catalyst you can use in your area. With the weather conditions the way they are, we're going to use the RU311. It's a medium reducer, and it's ready to go for the temperature that we have. Safety issues is a big thing. I recommend that you wear a cartridge mask always in any type of automotive spraying, primering, clearing, candying. This is a must. Normally when I do my clear coating, I wear a complete suit chute that covers my face, my ears. You can wear a sock over that so you can keep every part of your body covered. Next would be the mixing. This is probably the most technical and important part of clear coating. Without proper mixing, you're going to open yourself to lots of problems. This clear here is going to be mixed at a 2:1 ratio. So my best way of mixing is I like to get these cups. They have the ratios on them. That way you can mix it exactly. If you don't like buying a bunch of these cups, they have metal sticks available. You can put the stick in a metal cup and do it that way. Don't be using Coke cups, Pepsi cups, or what have you. It has a wax element on the inside. You're just opening yourself up to more problems. Last, I'd like to get into the gun. Okay, before we put anything into the gun, always use a strainer before we mix the material and put it into the gun. What's nice about the gun that I'm going to be using today is the LPH 400. It has this little filter right here, which is your last resort of catching anything that was put into the cup. So we have first this stopper, then we have this stopper. The cup is removed and this fits right in here. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the equipment I'm using. I'm going to be using the LPH 400, which is one of my favorite guns. This is the gun that I recommend highly for doing full, complete clear coating jobs as far as automobiles, boats, jet skis, large areas. First of all, when we're going to be clear coating with the UC35, we're going to need to spray between 50 and 60 pounds. Clearing is a little bit different than candying, but if you can clear coat, you can candy coat. So we're going to be about 6 inches away from the area. Okay? Here's our fluid control. I like to go all the way in and then come out 5 clicks. Depending on the weather and the conditions and the temperature and the different types of reducers we're going to be using, this will determine your fluid control. This is a variance between who's ever using the gun. I like to go all the way in and start out 5 clicks. My fan control, I'm going to adjust my fan control from the same distance I'm going to be from the panel. I'm going to be approximately 6 inches from the panel, so I'm going to want to use a 6 to 7 inch fan. The most important thing about clear coating, we're going to demonstrate a little bit here with the flat panel, is we want to keep the gun totally in square with the panel. We're going to be very mechanical in this motion. You want to be like a robot. We're going to move the gun in this direction. Now when we're doing with a flat panel, do not let go of the trigger till we are totally off the surface. Once we're off the surface, we have let go of the trigger. We're going to do a 50% overlap, then come back at a 50% overlap. Right at the same speed, and we're at the same distance, 6 inches away. We're not going to let go of the trigger till we come all the way off the panel. Okay, now that we're ready to do the clear coating, we're going to go ahead and show you how to mix the material properly. Like I said, once again, I like using these cups. I'm going to go to a 2 to 1 to 1 ratio. So I'm going to start on this. I want my clear to come up to the second line. That's 2 parts there. So we're going to go ahead and pour. We're going to come right up to the second line. You need to be exact with this. This is a very critical stage. Once again, if you do not mix this exact, it will not dry properly and you're going to have problems. Okay, now that we're at the second line here with the clear, we're going to go to 1 for the KU 150, which is the catalyst. Okay, we're going to come right up and boom, there we are, right on the second line. This is very, very important. I cannot stress this more than I am now. Okay, last phase is the 311. We're going to come up 1 more, so we're going 2 to 1 to 1. Okay, now that we have that complete, I suggest mixing this very thoroughly. Take your time. I always mix it right, then I stop, then I come back to the left. I want to be sure that I get the reducer to go all the way down and the catalyst. Everything needs to be mixed. I'd like to go over 2 quick things before we put the material inside of the gun. With the little filter here, this is our last chance of any safety, of any contamination getting into the passageway. So I've already installed one of these. I've gone over this before. Okay, always use a strainer with the gun, okay? This is very critical because we don't know about these products, how they were put into the containers or what have you, or what's in the containers. So this is our last bit of safety. We've already installed the filter, so now we're going to install the clear. Just pouring the clear in, any level, whatever you feel comfortable with. And the filter. You can use this over and over at the time you're clearing only. I recommend that the paint store gives them to you. Just use a new one every time you put new material into the gun. You put the cap on, and now we're ready to clear.
With the tack cloth, Dion's going to wipe the entire surface down to eliminate any particles, dust, or any surface dirt that may have collected while sitting in the booth area. Again, the tack rag is wadded up and just lightly dusted across the surface. He's already pre-cleaned the hood and removed any adhesive particles left over by the tape. It's very important to cover every inch of the vehicle with your tack rag. Sitting in a booth alone, even for an hour in a clean booth, can still attract dust. And the tack rag is very important to get a flawless clear coat. Dion's going to start spraying on one side of the hood, working his way to the middle, slowly getting 50-50 coverage, basically overlapping every other spray pattern 50%. He's approximately 6 to 7 inches from the surface, and he's using a 6 to 7 inch spray fan. This is crucial for getting even distribution of your clear coat. Notice he holds the hose behind his back. Keeping the hose away from the vehicle is a hidden talent with many clear coaters. Moving to the other side of the vehicle, Dion starts the spray pattern back again. Again, every pass covers the next one at a 50% coverage rate. When working on an entire vehicle, Dion will start from the bottom, and work his way up, walking around the entire car getting the lower rockers. Then does the hood exactly the same way as he's doing this one. He never crosshatches. If you crosshatch clear, many times you can see the crosshatch marks later on, even after buffing. Because of the hot weather in our spray booth area, we only had a 5-minute window before the clear started tacking up. Dion pulled his mixture adjustment back one full click so he could come on with an even heavier coat. This will eliminate any dry areas. Also, by doing minimum number of coats on the hood, if you can get the complete coverage with the minimum coats, you'll also get less orange peel effect, which happens with too much material buried over too many layers. Starting as an overlap, he's going to slowly start doing his 50% laps going to the other end of the hood. Notice the gun is even closer than before. He's lowered the gun's fan, made it smaller, but also lowered the distance between the gun and the hood, enabling him to put more material with less overspray. With very hot weather, you want to keep the gun close to the surface and move at a faster rate, because the hot weather will make the overspray stick to other parts of the vehicle that are starting to tack off. At this point, the hood's going to tack for another 5 minutes or so, and the final wet coated clear will be applied. Working on the graphic panel, Dion does the same overlap technique he did on the hood. If you've noticed, Dion is not using a tack coat on this kind of painting. Instead, he's using 2 medium wet coats. With the weather we have over here in the booth, we don't have to worry about the tack coat being used as an anchor for the paint. The 2 medium coats will dry fast enough. If you have cooler weather, you're going to want to use that tack coat before your first coat of clear. Now we're at the final phase of our custom paint job. All custom paint jobs are gauged by the quality of their clear coat, and clear coats are usually determined by the quality of buffing done by either the clear coater or his detailer. In this situation, we're going to be buffing our clear that we did yesterday on this panel. It's had it overnight to dry, and it's nice and hard. If you sand a panel too soon when it's been cleared, it'll get gummy. It won't ever buff out to the shine you want. Now, the materials we're going to be using today are 3M, and we have the 3M Perfected 3 system. We have the polishing compound, we have the foam polish, and then we have the final hand glaze. We use a lot of the polishing compound, and because of the way we like to direct it onto the surface when we're working, we put it in the small application bottles. As far as sandpaper goes, we're also using 3M. We've been pre-soaking for 15 minutes, which is very important to make sure it's soft enough so that it won't scratch the surface. We're using 2000 grit 3M in this situation, and you might even want to put a few drops of ivory soap or any other non-detergent soap in there to act as a lubricant. Now, sanding is not just to remove the tooth or to break the shine off the surface so we can come in and buff. This is considered color sanding. This isn't sanding in preparation for repainting. That would be done with much coarser grit sandpaper such as 600. 2000 grit sandpaper is about the finest you really want to start out with. Anything finer and you're going to be spending a lot more time. Anything coarser and you can cause some scratching problems. Now, Dion's not just sanding off the shine. He's also knocking down any dust nibs or any small particles that may have gotten in the clear from the booth or from sitting. Even small bugs that get in the surface of the clear don't require completely re-clear coating the job. Sometimes you can just sand the small bug or mite out of the clear job. As you're sanding, you want to go back and forth in even strokes. You don't want to crosshatch when color sanding. Any crosshatching can sometimes cause scratches and can cause a pattern you'll see in the clear. As you notice, Dion then takes the soft rag and wipes the surface down. This is very important, not just to remove the water, but to remove any contaminants or any of the sanding residue that's left behind. Small particles of sanding residue can build up and cause scratches. Therefore, it's very important to keep the surface consistently clean. Working on a larger vehicle, you may even want to keep a hose in one hand and slightly trickle water over the whole surface in lieu of wiping it down. Now that Dion's finished sanding the panel with 2000 grit, it's time to start machine polishing. We've got our compounds right here. We're going to start out with the 3M Perfected 3 polishing compound. These are all water-based, which is superior to the old solvent-based system, which is to dry up and actually cause burning when you would be polishing with it. Dion's going to go ahead and use his machine polisher with a woolen pad. The wool pad's removable on a Velcro system. This becomes handy when you want to remove them and replace them with other pads for other types of polishing, and you don't have to bring out the screwdriver. Nice thing about the removable woolen pads is they're also machine washable. Just don't wash them with your other clothes. When polishing small panels, it's best to do it with two people. One to hold the panel firmly down and the other one to polish it. We also do this with tanks and helmets. Using the variable speed control, Dion is bringing the RPMs up and down according to the amount of buffing he's doing. When you're buffing, you keep the pad at a slight angle to help cut. If you flatten the pad out, it won't polish. It'll just be shifting the material back and forth. After Dion runs the polish over the whole thing with the variable speed buffer, we're going to come in with the foam pad and use the foam polish. This is a swirl remover and also a fine polish to get rid of any fine scratches or any swirl marks left by the previous buffing. After all the foam polishing has been done, the swirls have been taken out, Dion's going to go to the hand glaze. This is specifically designed for hand polishing. You don't machine polish with hand glaze. He's going to use two rags. One's going to be an applicator rag, which he's going to use to apply the glaze to the entire surface. It goes on like a cream, and you spread it out and rub it in small concentric circles throughout the entire surface evenly. As you're rubbing it on, it'll start to slowly dry and haze out on the surface. When it gets to that certain level of equal haze, you can then use your clean rag to wipe the entire surface off. Hand glazing is not a form of polishing. It's closer to a form of waxing. It's literally almost a sealer. We will do hand glazing quite often right before shows or right after we've washed a car and waxed it. Hand glazing is a nice way to do a top shine and clean up the entire area that you just got finished polishing. Perfected 3's hand glaze is perfect for this type of job. Because clear coating is one of the most misunderstood aspects of custom painting, many an excellent paint job goes unnoticed because of poor application. I hope this video has helped clear up any problems concerning techniques, application, or equipment usage in custom clear coating. So from Craig Frazier and Dion Giuliano, Cal Concepts and Air Syndicate, thank you for watching.